A brilliant light pierced the darkness on that first Christmas night. It wasn't the immense star so bright that intrigued experts of the night sky to follow it. It wasn't even the multitude of angelic messengers with a light so intense, so radiant, it frightened brave shepherds to fall to their knees. No, this light was far greater, more powerful than every star and every sun. This light was a baby, a tiny newborn wrapped in cloth, lying in a manger where animals feed. A baby named Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us. Because Jesus was a gift for each one of us, and he arrived with a purpose, to shine light into all dark places. You see, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light. A light that shows us there is no place you can go that can escape God's love. No dark corner where his love cannot find you. A light that has the power to cut through any darkness, to calm the most anxious thoughts, and to fill every heart with unspeakable joy. There is a light that shines brightly in the darkness, and his name is Jesus, light of the world.
So recently I was at a concert at the school nearby in our town in Rockport there. So I was at a concert. We were listening to a song that had a bunch of crescendos in it. Those of you who don't know music terms, that's when everything gets real loud. So it's kind of a big moment in the song. And there was one song in particular we were listening to that it was moving along. Everybody was really like almost on the edge of their seats with it. It was pretty cool. And they got to this point, this crescendo, then quiet, and everybody started clapping, and then the band broke into this whole rest of the song. There was the best yet to come, and we didn't even know it. Sometimes that can be a reality where there's more to come, but you're just happy with what you even see. Another example, another story, when we first moved to Massachusetts, I like driving around and looking at Christmas lights. I'm one of those people. I enjoy that. And I was pretty sad when we first moved here because we couldn't find any. There were some, but not many, and we're like, finally we found some houses that had a few, and we're like, okay, this is good, I guess. And then we found one that looked really good, and I was like, all right, finally, we found a good Christmas house. Didn't even know until I talked to some of you in this room, we missed all the good ones. There are actually neighborhoods with a lot of lights. Sometimes we can be caught gazing at all of the other lights and miss the best light. My mic isn't working?
Yeah, it got disconnected.
Can I have the handheld? Oh, the battery died.
I think you did it.
Hello. All right. Now those of you at home can hear me too. You missed that first part, sorry. So we can get caught gazing at all of the other kind of lights and miss the real good ones. We can get caught gazing at all of the other things in life, the peripheral lights, and only caught glancing at the true light. Do you hear the difference? What do you gaze at versus what do you glance at? A glance is a quick look, right? A gaze is a deep, abiding look. We can get caught gazing at all of the other lights. We have to get our travel plans in order for Christmas. We have to get these gifts wrapped. I didn't even buy gifts yet. I have to go buy them. We have to be with this family. I love that family. That person's hard to talk to. Like you can get focused on all the other stuff. I got to make sure I get the right ornaments in the right place on the tree. I got to make sure the lights are up, whatever. We can be caught gazing at all of that. That can consume your mindset, can't it? While only glancing at the true light, the light of the world. Our desire today is to reverse that. That's the desire. Hundreds of years, thousands of years ago from today, even thousands of years before Jesus was born, there was a man named Isaiah. He spoke for God, called a prophet. Isaiah 49 verse 2 says, "The people who walk in darkness will see a great light." Those who live in a dark land feel that. Don't just hear these words quickly and move on. Feel that. Those who live in a dark land. This doesn't mean they're off the electric grid. You get that? This is a spiritual darkness. Those who live in a dark land, the light will shine on them. John chapter 1 is where we've been the past few weeks. If you want to turn there with me, we read about the fulfillment of this verse in John chapter 1. We read about the fulfillment. We left off at verse 5 last week. The light shines. Notice that's present tense verb now. It's shining now. Isaiah was saying there's going to come a day, there's darkness in this world. There's going to come a day where there's a light that shines. But here's going to be the reality. Isaiah made it look like this is just going to be, it's so dark, lights flipped on. Good, I can see. And that's how the world would feel. But look at what happened. The light shines in the darkness. The darkness didn't grasp it. That word grasp is a complex word. It could mean grasp in the sense of comprehending, understanding, making sense of it. It could mean grasp in the sense of overtaking it. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not lay hold of it. What does that mean? It means the light's still shining. The light is still shining, but the darkness is still there. Do you see that? We may have wished for Isaiah's prophecy to come true in the sense that the light shines, all the darkness is gone, there's no more darkness in the world, all we ever knew was goodness. Anybody else would have enjoyed that maybe? That would have been great. That's not the way it worked. But the light still shines. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not grasp it. When we think about darkness, I said back in Isaiah, I want you to feel that. The darkness of a land. Not very Christmassy, right? We just want to talk about happy things today. Well, here's the thing. The light is great. The light is strong. But we have to think about the darkness too. That's what John does in John chapter 1, is he's addressing both to draw out the contrast, but to also show the overwhelming greatness of the light that the darkness cannot overcome, cannot understand. However your version reads, the light is greater. But we got to think through this dark. How do you get rid of darkness? How do you get rid of darkness? You flip on a light, right? Sounds really easy, doesn't it? All right, well, let's get rid of spiritual darkness then. Oh. We can't flip on that light, can we? God has to do it, doesn't he? How does that work? See, humans try to address the reality of darkness because it's a reality, right? There aren't enough Christmas cookies we can eat or Christmas songs we can sing to ignore the reality that there's darkness in the world, right? It's just a reality. And we don't have to ignore it because Jesus is that much greater, right? We don't have to ignore it and pretend it's not real. It is real. But Jesus is the light shining that one day will completely dispel all of the darkness 100%. There will be no more darkness. But for now, humans know it. We see it. We live in a world that names it. But as Martin Luther King Jr. said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. What does that mean? It actually means a lot. There's a lot wrapped up in that statement. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Of course, we know that to be true with physical light, right? You wouldn't go flip on a dark switch. That would not make sense. But spiritually speaking, there are things that are wrong in and of themselves that humans can try to do to get rid of other wrongs. Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense, but we do it. The little white lie, right? Well, what? It was for the better good of the other person. What was it? Or is Martin Luther King Jr. right that actually darkness can't drive out darkness? And so you weren't really helping. You weren't really making things better, brighter, spiritually speaking, for that person. Today's goal, as I said, is really that we get to a place where we walk out of here feeling, thinking, living this way, that we are giving up on the darkness, not trying to hold on to it, but giving up on the darkness and only glancing at the lesser lights while gazing at the true light. That's our goal for today, that we will give up on the darkness, that we will only glance at the lesser lights, and that we will be gazing at the true light. The light shines in the darkness. Jesus, the Son of God, who became human, is knowable. God is knowable. There is not just injustice and sin in the world. There is not just darkness. There's a great light. The light shines in the darkness. But the darkness can't overcome it. It can't understand it. It's just so much inferior to this. But we're going to wrestle with this today. We're going to work through these each parts of this statement and break this down so that hopefully we can walk out from here believing, living, thinking this as we leave here today. As we think about light, as we think about darkness, as we think about that in the sense of spiritual realities, we need to kind of orient ourselves thinking in the same direction. So I want to do that from John chapter 3. Light is a big deal for John. If you haven't read the Gospel of John in the Bible, he talks about it a lot. Light is a big deal for him. And in John chapter 3, starting in verse 16, we read this. Now remember, think darkness. Think the reality that there are people who are glad to cheat, steal, that they're glad to murder, that are glad to do all kinds of horrific, awful things, that there is injustice in our world. The world is dark. But then John 3:16, for God so loved the world. How did he love the world? How did he do it? He gave his one and only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send the Son or the light or the Word that became flesh, all Jesus. God did not send him into the world to judge the world, but that the world might be saved through him. He who believes in him is not judged. He who does not believe has been judged already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. Well, what is that judgment? It's saying people who are rejecting Jesus are already judged. What is that? Verse 19 answers that. This is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men loved the darkness rather than the light. Why would you love dark rather than light? he answers that too, doesn't he? For their deeds were evil. For everyone who does evil hates the light and does not come to the light for fear that his deeds will be exposed. But he who practices the truth comes to the light so that his deeds may be manifested as having been wrought, brought about, birthed, developed, energized in God. You see what we're talking about here? We're not talking about physical light rays. That's the analogy he's using. When he says that he talks about the light in John chapter 1, he uses the word phos in the original language, in the Greek. We get photography, we get photons, we get all kinds of words from that we regularly use and know. It's energy. It's energy. It's a powerful reality. And I'm not going to do a science lesson because I'm not a scientist. But there's a strong, powerful reality in this word picture that God chose to use to help us understand spiritual realities. It's not like a scale of better and worse, right? It's light and darkness. That's how God chooses to communicate it. There is light and there is darkness. And he describes those who are in this darkness, and maybe they look at others in darkness and say, how could you be so dark, right? How could you do that? Be a light in the world. Do things that are better. Make the world a better place. But they're in the dark trying to make the world lighter with more darkness. And he says, all the while there's a true light, and they're shying away from the true light, Jesus. They're shying away from him. Well, why? Because they want the world to be a better place. Why don't they go to the one who can actually do it? Because there's this darkness in them they don't know how to deal with. And as much as they want to, they can't. And so when they really hear Jesus, think about Jesus, understand Jesus, it is scary, right? So they don't want to come to him. They don't want to have the realities of their mindsets and practices exposed. But verse 21 told us, he who practices the truth does what? Comes to the light. Practicing the truth, coming to the light are used here connectedly. How do you come to the light? Well, part of it is you trust and live out truth in your life. But you don't do it without the source, right? Jesus is the light. Doing that without him doesn't make sense. And when you do that, your deeds may be shown to be something with a power that this world doesn't know. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that what it says also in that verse? The things you do, oh yeah, Phil did that because he's really great. No. When we come to the light, what we do can be shown that we've spent time with God. It shines differently. Does that make sense? The same good deed can be completely empty and done by somebody in darkness. Somebody can see somebody stranded on the side of the road, hate Jesus, and help them change their tire, right? What this verse is saying is there is something different when somebody who loves Jesus and worships Jesus is doing that. It's not that they get the tire on differently or better, is it? It's a spiritual weight to it. Somehow that God is describing here. Jesus is the light of the world. That's what we're talking about when we talk about light and darkness. Maybe you've heard of Play-Doh, not Play-Doh, but Play-Toh. Not the thing you play with and that gets stuck in hair and on couches, by the way. Plato was a philosopher, and he said, we can easily forgive a child who's afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. Isn't that interesting he said that? Jesus is the light. I don't know that Plato knew that. And that's a real tragedy, in his own words. We can easily forgive a child who's afraid of the dark. Of course, who likes darkness? We all flip on lights when we get in the house. Maybe you're somebody who doesn't. You just walk through your house with no lights. I don't know. I've never met somebody who that does that, but maybe I have, and you've been hiding it. I don't know. You're afraid of that being exposed today. But we flip on the lights, right? We like the light. But the real tragedy is when men, women, people, humans are afraid of the light. That's the real tragedy. Let's pull from another more modern writer. Some of you may know the children's author Shel Silverstein. He said, just listen to this. He says, "The baby bat screamed out in fright, 'Turn on the dark. I'm afraid of the light.'" Interesting. He's a really interesting author, by the way, but he says, I'm going to read it again. "The baby bat screamed out in fright, 'Turn on the dark. I'm afraid of the light.'" Honesty in that quote, right? It's interesting. So as we're thinking through this light, this darkness, hear these words from Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 4. He's describing people in this world who are in darkness, who need to see the great light. And he says this, "In whose case the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving." Who did? Satan. The God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving. Why did he blind their minds? Notice it's their minds that are blind. Why did he blind their minds? So that they might not see the light of the gospel. So they might not see the light. Now listen to this really unique, specific description of this light. It's the light of the good news, the gospel, light of the good news or gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. Rolls right off the tongue, right? Paul's good at writing sentences that do not roll right off the tongue, but are really packed full of stuff to think about. The light of the good news. What's that say? The good news, the gospel, the message that should be declared that there is a God who made the world, and that he has been God always, that Jesus was God from the beginning, still is God, always will be God, and he became human, and that in becoming human, that wasn't really the end of the story, but that he lived a perfect life, no sin, because he's God himself, fully, truly God and truly man. He lived, he died. Why would he die if he's God? Because the great light needs to dispel the darkness. The light of the good news, the light of the good news is this. It's all wrapped up in the glory, the understanding, the radiance of the Messiah Jesus, the one who was prophesied, told about thousands of years from right after the first sin was created. He was prophesied, and he finally came, lived, died in your and my place because of our sin, because of our darkness. Jesus died for your darkness, spiritually speaking. If you do not know that, it's darkness trying to chase out darkness. If you know that, you are brought into a relationship by faith to the one who can chase the darkness away. And that's why he used the word glory, right? And this Jesus is the image of God. He goes on, though. He says, we do not preach ourselves, because it's not us. I am not the source of this spiritual light. I can't be, I won't be. The things I do will be empty if Jesus doesn't fill them. He is the source. We do not preach ourselves, but Christ Jesus as Lord, and ourselves as bondservants for Jesus' sake. Here's another verse we've got to slow down for. For God, who said, light shall shine out of darkness. Do you remember that in creation, Genesis 1? Let there be light, and light. which, by the way, I'm not going to do a tangent in science because, again, I'm not a scientist, but you should look into that. The speed of light, how fast it travels, how did it reach the stretches of the universe instantaneously? It's actually pretty amazing. In a moment, God spoke. The entire universe was filled with light. The entire universe. Spiritually, right? Physically, he gave light then to the earth. He said, let there be light. The earth had light. But then, because of our sin, there was spiritual darkness once again, or not once again, but for the first time on the earth, the newly created earth. This same one is the one who has shone in, not the earth, not the universe. Where did he shine? In our hearts, to give the light. Again, what is the light? It's the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ. When we're talking about light versus darkness, that's what we're saying. If I am living in spiritual light, there is an exact specific definition to that that is not up to human language. A lot of people will talk about light, right? Being light, finding light, sharing light. What is the light? Here's what God says the light is. It is the knowledge of the glory of God. Well, how can you know the glory of God? The one who is so glorious, nothing in creation can contain him. The one who is eternal. The one who has a presence that is filled with holiness and unapproachable light and perfection no man can see or has seen. How can we know him? In the face of Jesus. He who has seen Jesus has seen God, because Jesus is God. That is the light. So now let's spend a little bit here just pulling apart our goal. Our goal is, again, to be giving up on the darkness and only glancing at lesser lights while gazing at the true light. So let's do this kind of one line at a time. Giving up on the darkness. Giving up on the darkness. Again, back in John chapter 1, our text for the day. The light shines in the darkness. The darkness is still there in that verse, right? The light is shining into the darkness. Now, when you flip on a physical light, what does darkness do? It flees, right? It's gone. There isn't darkness anymore. Or there's a shadow and, pockets of darkness in that sense. But this says the light shines in the darkness. That's interesting. The darkness didn't overcome it. Try as the darkness might to overcome it, it couldn't. The light is stronger. We want to give up on darkness. Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6 has some words to say about this darkness. It says, the eye is the lamp of the body, so then if your eye is clear, your whole body will be full of light. If your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? That's the darkness we're talking about giving up on. And do you see, if you heard those words in Matthew 6, it has to do with where your eyes are focused, right? The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is clear, your whole body will be full of light. Has to do with what you're focusing on, looking at. If you're looking at the light of the world, what fills you? Light, right? If you're not looking at light, if you're looking at dark, what will fill you? Light, right? No, actually, darkness. What you look at fills you. That's really important. Giving up on the darkness has to do with what you look at. What are you looking at? And again, we talked about this light has to do with your mind and understanding who God is. It has to do with that spiritual light. We see that in our minds. What are you looking at that you shouldn't be? This may be something that's like really obvious in some of your minds right now. Like, don't click on certain things on the computer anymore. Don't watch certain things anymore that I shouldn't on TV. It might be something obvious like that. Maybe it's actually something that my mind is so looking at, I'm so upset that that person hurt me in this way, and that's all I can think about. What are you looking at when you do that? Darkness. Maybe that's why Jesus said we have to forgive every time we pray, right? Because he knows that darkness will shape the way you think, the way you feel, the way you worship, that you won't be able to see Jesus clearly and you won't be able to see life clearly because you're so focused on the wrongs. I'm not saying wrongs are okay. And I'm not saying we shouldn't confront people, call people out when wrongs happen. We should. What I'm saying is don't live there. Because Jesus helps us move past it. I hope that's really clear. I realize there's room to make this confusing with words. I hope this is really clear that as we're giving up darkness, it may be I'm so focused on a certain thing, a certain wrong in the past, a certain injustice in the world that I actually should care about, right? It was wrong. I should care that it was wrong. Because God's holy and he cares, right? But I'm not God. That's one thing. I can't change it. I can be obedient to him and do the things he wants me to do, like maybe confront somebody that I don't want to talk to, or help somebody who's being hurt that nobody else is helping, right? But if I gaze deeply into darkness, what's going to happen to my heart? It will not be okay, will it? So yeah, we got to glance at those things. We can't gaze at those things. We can't. Ephesians 4:11 says, do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but instead even expose them. I want you to hear the word expose them, not in the American expose way, but in the terms he actually means it when he's thinking about light in Ephesians 3 and 4. He's talking about darkness right there, right? So how do you expose darkness when you're talking about light, and that's your analogy? How do you expose something to light? You shine the light, right? It's not an expose of, I have to list the litany of every wrong thing that's ever happened. It's you bring it and expose the person to Jesus. So he says, do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness. Don't. Expose them. How do you expose them? Well, I do a deep dive into YouTube or Google, and I find out everything there is to find out about it, and then I expose them. No, that's not what he means. Why? Your brain, your mind, your heart will be really unhealthy. That's why. So how do you expose it? What you know, you bring the light of the knowledge of the glory of God to bear in it. You bring the gospel to bear in the situation. How does the gospel help? How does the gospel give hope? How does the gospel bring light into the darkness? Don't take a master's degree on sin to expose it, right? That just doesn't make sense. You can't chase out darkness with darkness. But you can by worshiping and seeing Jesus and bringing Jesus to bear on the situation. So he says, all things become visible when they are exposed by light, and everything that becomes visible is light. For this reason it says, awake, sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. I will never be able to read those words right. I feel like I should be like shouting them or something. Like, awake, sleeper, rise from the dead. Christ will shine on you. Like, those are huge words. I will never be able to do justice. Give up on the darkness. Awake. If you have something in your life, if you've never put your faith in Jesus and you're still stuck in the darkness, put your faith in him today. Realize he paid the price of your sin, of your darkness, so you can be forgiven and brought into a relationship with God. And you can know goodness and pure light. You can know holiness and truth and righteousness. You can know that. If you already know Jesus, do you have darkness you need to give up on? Write it down if you need to. If you're embarrassed to write it down, okay, but deal with it. And what I want to say is, you need Jesus to deal with it for you. Again, if your deeds are not wrought, birthed, energized by God, they're empty. Come to God. Don't hide your stuff from God. He can handle it. Bring it to him. Confess it to him. He's faithful and just to forgive it and to cleanse you. Do you hear the goodness in those words? To cleanse you? When you're really dirty and have a bunch of stuff stuck on you, it feels really good to get a shower. Give up on the darkness. Give up on the darkness. The second, we want to be glancing at the lesser lights. We want to be glancing at the lesser lights. John chapter 1, let's pick up at verse 6. A man came, one sent from God, and his name was John. He came as a witness to testify about the light, so that all might believe through him. He was not the light. Why did John point that out? You realize all the other Gospels kind of emphasize John the Baptist and how great he was? And John just kind of points out he wasn't the light. Because actually, when you do good things for God, you can get a lot of attention to yourself, right? And the whole point here is, he's not the true light. As much as he helped people, as much as people flocked to him, and maybe others got upset by him, but he had a huge following, and he said, it's not me. I'm not the true light. I'm not even worthy to untie his sandals. Jesus is coming after me. He says, I need to become less so he can become more. It's not about me. But we can get caught up on the lesser lights and miss the greater light, can't we? We can get so hung up on gazing at lesser lights. So that's why John says this for two reasons. One, it shows the right perspective that Jesus is the light, not John. But secondly, do you hear the courtroom language in those verses I just read? A man came, one sent from God. His name was John. He came as a witness, courtroom language, to testify, courtroom language, about the light, so that all may believe through him. He was not the light. He came to testify, courtroom language, about the light. He's also saying you can trust this. There are evidences that you can test and hear and know. For example, there was a prophet named Malachi who prophesied that there was one who would come. Isaiah as well prophesied that there would be a voice crying in the wilderness, make straight the path for the Lord. The light of the world is coming. God is becoming human. Make this clear. It was prophesied thousands of years earlier, hundreds of years earlier in one case. It depends which one. That's pretty amazing, right? 70 weeks of Daniel. You can do the math to when Jesus was rejected by his own people and they didn't receive him. Take it to the court. It passes the test, right? How did God do that? Because he's God. It's easy for him. That's how. And so we see the courtroom language in here as well. We can't get hung up on you can master all of the details of prophecy and miss Jesus, though, right? Or you can say, no, I want to worship Jesus, and who cares about prophecy? Both are wrong. You have to have both. But why should you care about prophecy in the Bible? Because it should fuel your worship. Because you can look at it and see, that blows my mind how you fit that together. How is it in Genesis chapter 1, you promised, or chapter 3, you promised to Eve a descendant who would crush the head of the serpent. And then you just kept doing that on almost every page of Scripture as it unfolds until Jesus eventually one day will dispel all darkness. How do you do that? It should lead you to worship. You can't have Jesus without his word. You can't have his word without him. He is the word who became flesh, who had the life and is the light of men. That's what we see. Don't get caught glazing at the lesser lights. Glance at them, don't gaze at them. Lesser things can become the greatest thing in your life, though, can't they? Again, is there anything like that? How easy does your calendar replace God's promptings? Right? I've said it before, don't write your calendar in pen, write it in pencil, because God can change it at any time. The lesser things can become the greater things. Don't mess with my calendar. Don't mess with my Christmas traditions, right? The lesser things can become the greater things. And some of those aren't bad things. You should have a calendar. I'm glad that you know when Sunday is, right? Like, you should have a calendar. It's not that it's a bad thing. It's that when it becomes the greatest thing, that's a problem. This is, in a sense, a glory war. What is glory? It's bringing light to someone or something. That's what glory is. It's bringing light to the essence of someone or something. God, his glory radiates from him. And it helps us see who he is, right? So, in a sense, this thing of what we glance at, the lesser lights, is a glory war. It's amazing how much we can glorify things like sports teams, like coffee, like getting the perfect gift, like whatever pastime you're really into. Just if you happened to leave on whatever it's Siri or Bixby or OK Google or whatever it is, and it tracked all of your words in a week, and you went back and saw the transcript and just did a search, how many times did I use the word Jesus or God versus the word whatever else? Coffee. For me, Emily, my wife. She's really important. Jesus is greater. There are times where this gets really hard, right? It's not that the lesser lights aren't good. I am glad John spoke so clearly about who Jesus was, aren't you? But if you miss Jesus, it's all worthless. So we need to be giving up on the darkness, glancing at the lesser lights, and finally do this while we gaze at the true light. Hear these words from John Owen. On Christ's glory, I would fix all my thoughts and desires. And the more I see of the glory of Christ, the more the painted beauties of this world will wither in my eyes. And I will be more and more crucified to this world. It will become to me like something dead. Pretty direct language. On Christ's glory, I would fix all my thoughts and desires. 2 Timothy 1:10 says, but now has been revealed by the appearing of our Savior Christ Jesus, who abolished death and brought life and immortality to light through the gospel. He brought life and immortality to light through the gospel. In 1 John 1:5, this is the message we have heard from him and announced to you, that God is light, and in him. Are you glad for this? There is no darkness at all. The world is dark, isn't it? There are hard realities you and I have to see and face. But there is a reality that in our world, for example, depression is on the rise right now, right? One of the reasons, there are many, but one of the reasons is because of what we've done over the past few years with YouTubing everything. And I have to find every answer to my every single question, even about injustices and wrong things, right? And there's just this driving in me I have to solve this problem. And there's not a center of worshiping Jesus. There are people who are just so surrounded by news. This got destroyed. This bank got robbed. The markets are crashing. Inflation's coming. There's war and there's famines and there's difficulties and one bad thing after another, right? Again, news is good. I'm glad you're aware of what goes on in the world. But has that become the greater thing in your vision? When darkness fills you, or when you look at darkness, darkness is what fills you, right? Be careful what you let your eyes see. We must see Jesus more than all of this other stuff. John Owen said it, on Christ's glory I would fix all my thoughts and desires. The more I see of the glory of Christ, the more the painted beauties of this world will wither in my eyes. And I will be more and more crucified to this world. It will become to me like something dead. Do you think that's even possible? I wonder. I think he's right. It is a worship issue. It is a glory war. What do you give the most glory to? What do you glorify the most? Is it Jesus or is it something else? So I simply say, awake, sleeper. Rise from the dead, and Christ will shine.